But some men weren't bothered about looking manly. In fact, they didn't mind if you thought they were girls. Some girls didn't mind if you thought they were boys. Welcome to one of my favorite things ever, glam rock. Glam rock was primarily a musical movement, but of course a huge fashion tie-in that originated in Britain in the early 1970s. It was a reaction to what was happening in England at the time. Of course, we had IRA terrorism, which we've already discussed, but also there were an awful lot of strikes. Everyone went on strike. The electricity workers went on strike. I remember being a child in the early 1970s, and there was an era of maybe 6 months or a year when you only had electricity for 3 days a week. Imagine that. I thought it was great. I was a kid, you know. Candles, fires, darkness. It was exciting to me, but I'm sure my parents thought it was a total drag. The teachers went on strike. Oh, even better news for little Amanda. Didn't have to go to school. But anyway, it was a bleak, very bleak moment, and glam rock was incredible, silly, fun reaction to the gloom of the landscape. Glam rock stars dressed incredibly. The most famous of the glam rockers is David Bowie, who would go on to have a very distinguished career far beyond his glam rock roots. But here he is in really quite an incredible outfit. Glam rock mixed space age stuff with retro stuff like this. What is this? I can't find the words to describe this. It's sort of retro, but it's kind of futuristic too. You'll note men wearing makeup like this. Freddie Mercury of Queen, he was a glam rock artist. Look what he is wearing. Glam rock was all about lightning bolts. It was about sequins. It was about glitter and metallics. Look at what this band, Slade, are wearing. I can't even describe what they are wearing here, except that it's incredibly fun. There were glam rock chicks as well. This is Susie Quattro, a lady glam rocker. Glam rockers appropriated a lot of 1950s ideas as well. Tight black leather, for example. This is David Bowie with his glam rock wife, Angie Bowie. Which is the boy, which is the girl? Doesn't matter. There they are with their child. Don't know if that's a boy or a girl too. Please note David Bowie's platform heels here. Incredibly fun and silly, and just a fun reaction to what was going on in the world. Let's meet our style icon of the glam rock era. This guy. He's called Mark Bolan, and he was the lead singer of the glam rock band T-Rex. I've chosen him as our style icon instead of David Bowie, because what David Bowie wore was just too extreme to ever be assimilated or copied by normal people on the street. Whereas Mark Bolan's look, as you will see, was assimilated by many of his fans. There is Mark in full glam rock thrust, and you'll note that he is wearing a cheetah print jacket. Again, this tie-in between futuristic, glittery, metallic stuff and old school retro glamour. That was glam rock. His corkscrew curls are very 1930s actually, and he was very famous for them. He was a heartthrob. But this is all about androgyny, isn't it? David Bowie, was he a boy or a girl? He was a boy, but he didn't mind if he looked like a girl. His wife, Angie Bowie, she didn't mind if she looked like a boy. Susie Quattro, she was a very sexy girl who kind of looked like a boy. I interviewed her once, very nice lady. Mark Bolan really was the epitome of androgyny. He was a little bit fey. Do you know what that word means? Oh, a little bit whimsical, maybe a little bit girly. But his look was great. There he is. Look at that feather boa he has. Everybody wore feather boas who was a glam rock fan. And here he is again. And you can see why his look really worked. He was truly androgynous in the truest sense of the word. Because while everybody knew he was a boy, his clothes could be worn by women. His look was assimilated by both of genders. See what I mean? And look, there is Mark with one of his fans. That's a male fan who has embraced Mark Bolan's look. But here are two female fans who have embraced Mark Bolan's look. This is why Mark Bolan is somebody you should really know about. You should listen to a T-Rex. Maybe you know a few of their songs without knowing that you know them. Songs like Jeepster and Hot Love. I mean, these are huge, huge hits. You may not know them, but they're really worth going to Spotify and listening to. He's one of my favorite 70s artists, actually. Look at these two girls here. Yes, they are huge Mark Bolan fans. They're both carrying banners that say Mark. They don't look happy, though. They're not going to a Mark Bolan concert. They are going to Mark Bolan's funeral. Sadly, this gorgeous, very positive, sweet guy was killed in a car crash at the height of his fame. But that whimsical sweetness and enchantment that marked his personality is really beautifully encapsulated in this quote. I think I am a child. Everything blows my mind. I love that. Everything blows my mind. Is glam rock blowing your mind? I hope so. By the time glam rock hit the mainstream, wait, it never hit the mainstream. It was too way out. And it's just as well because look what happened when it tried to hit the mainstream. Wow. Here are a few contemporary fashion images that obviously draw on glam rock style. Take a look at that, with that red David Bowie hair and the cheetah and the fuchsia, obviously inspired by glam rock. As is this. Hello. Very intentionally homaging David Bowie there on a recent runway. Take a look at this, completely glam rock. As is this. As is this. Alright, I think we've done glam rock. I don't know about you, but this seems like a good time to talk about platform heels. The 70s were renowned for platform heels. Now, we've kind of met platform heels before, haven't we, in the 1940s? But it was really in the 70s that they reached their greatest heights, and I mean that pun quite deliberately. Platform heels were worn by women everywhere and by the trendiest of men. Platform heels caused a sensation. People were genuinely shocked by the height of platform heels. And I don't know about you, but look at those boots on the right. I'm genuinely shocked by them now. The next 70s megatrend I want to talk to you about, I have dubbed effortless elegance. This minimal, elegant, no-fuss trend kicked off at something that fashion calls Versailles 73. Now, we've seen Versailles before, haven't we? Guys, do you remember? We saw it in the 17th century with Louis XIV, and then we saw it in the 18th century with Louis XVI and all those aristocrats pooing behind the curtains. Well, maybe it was because of all that poo that by the time we get to the early 70s, France was desperate to raise money to restore the Hall of Mirrors. So the French government, along with the French fashion syndicate, decided to host a gala fashion show at Versailles where every celebrity and royal minor royal, would attend. And the idea behind Versailles 73 was to, oh, I don't know, celebrate both French and American design. What? American design? There's no such thing, surely. It wasn't a competition, but of course it was a competition. On the French side, you have Yves Saint Laurent, Marc Bolan of Dior, Hubert de Givenchy, Emmanuel Ungaro, Pierre Cardin. Come on. American designers up against these guys? They're like the Ninja Turtles of France, of fashion plus one. Who did the Americans offer up? Because it was a competition. This was versus. On the American team, we had Anne Klein, Bill Blass, Oscar de la Renta, Halston, and Stephen Burrows. The Ninja Turtles of American fashion plus one. It wasn't supposed to be a competition, but of course it was. The French, of course, had elaborate sets, very elegant, luxurious stuff. The Americans arrived with a whole new attitude towards fashion. Minimalist, simple, elegant, no fuss. The French had incredible sets. The Americans had no sets. What they did have was Liza Minnelli. They brought Liza Minnelli with them, who did a fabulous number. They also brought African American models. This was revolutionary on the French fashion scene. At the end of the show, which went on forever, the French went first, and they had a very long and elaborate show, and by the time they were done, people were tired. Then the Americans came on, and it was like a shot of electricity went through the room. At the end of this, not competition, but it was a competition, the French audience threw their programs into the air. America had won, and a whole new attitude towards fashion had begun. Take a look at these images. Not all of these people were at Versailles 73, but this minimal, elegant, wearable silk, jersey, linen, knit would become one of the huge trends of the 70s and really make American fashion. People like Diane von Furstenberg, okay, she's not American, but she's counted as an American designer. Calvin Klein, Bill Blass, Halston, the latter two were at Versailles. Look how different this is. Look how clean. Look how perennial it is. Any of us could wear any of these dresses, and we'd look fabulous today. Nobody would say, why are you wearing dresses from almost 50 years ago? Would they? This look became the American look. And the person who wore it best is this woman, Lauren Hutton. She was a supermodel of the 70s. She was American. She was tall. She was tanned. She had a lovely big gap between her two front teeth. This revolutionized fashion, and it was at this point, at Versailles in 1973, that America became a part of the high fashion landscape. It's important. By the time it hit the mainstream, you're not going to like this. And I have nothing to say. You can kind of see that they are trying for the trend, but it is all going horribly, horribly wrong. The next 70s trend I want to talk to you about, I have dubbed Disco Inferno. And it looked like this. Now listen, guys. The idea of le discothèque had been around for a long time. The French were the first to coin the term discothèque, disco, in the 1960s, but then it died out. So weird. 10 years later, the American mainstream picked it up, and disco was born. One of the things that really pisses me off is when people call the 70s the disco decade. Listen, disco arrived in about 1975. It was gone by 1978. It was a short-lived moment within a decade full of far more interesting trends. But while disco lasted, it was huge. Let's take a look. It won't take us long to take a look because disco really was just a more glittery and blingy version of day wear, basically. Any kind of disco attire was only worn to the disco. Look, it's Charlie's Angels again in disco attire. And here are some guys in clothing that they would probably wear to a disco. There was no such thing as disco clothing. People wore just evening wear or nightclub wear in the same silhouette with the same ideas to the disco. Oh God, the disco. But when disco was big, it was big. And we have to talk about the style icon of the disco era, John Travolta, in Saturday Night Fever. Saturday Night Fever was the biggest movie of 1977. It was about a kind of loser working class kid in the suburbs of New York. I can't remember if he lived in Brooklyn or Queens. He and his friends have nothing to live for apart from going to the disco on Saturday night. It is a very depressing movie. But his look, his outfit, this white suit with the wide lapels and the black shirt and the waistcoat, became a huge fashion look. Here is a guy going to his prom in the Saturday Night Fever suit. But look at his prom date as well. She's really got that Versailles 73 minimalism going, doesn't she? Everybody did this look. Other pop stars copied this look. Really, everybody did this look, even people who really had no business doing it. This brings us to our cultural hotspot of the 70s. New York! Yes, New York! It's where the new New York fashion scene was coming out of. It's where Studio 54 was the hottest disco in the world. It's where Saturday Night Fever was set. And Taxi Driver and Annie Hall, these iconic movies we've already discussed. And it's where Christopher Street was, and still is, which brings us to our next trend. The 1970s were the era of the gay rights movement. You have to remember that prior to the gay rights movement, it was illegal to be gay. It was against the law. If you were gay, you must be mad. You were a criminal. It was perfectly legal if you were a gay teenager for your parents to put you into a mental institution and to subject you to electric shock therapy to cure you. You could legally be lobotomized if your parents consented to it. This is barbaric, obviously, and stupid, obviously, but guess what? It wasn't that long ago. It's in my lifetime. The gay liberation movement changed all that. And it started here, at the Stonewall Inn in the Village, right here in New York. What was the Stonewall Inn? It was a gay bar, but remember, you couldn't have gay bars, right? It was illegal to be gay. But of course there were gay bars, and this was one of them, where gay guys could get together and socialize, and mix and mingle. The Stonewall Inn was constantly being raided by the police, who would subject these poor guys to horrible brutality. They would be arrested. Imagine in this era, if you were, revealed as being, gay, your picture could be posted in the local newspaper so that your neighbors and colleagues, they'd know you were one of them. You could be fired from your job for being gay. So you can imagine what it was like to be gay in this era. Things started to change in 1969, right here at the Stonewall Inn. There were a bunch of gay men there having drinks, chatting, socializing with their friends. They were raided by the police again, but this time they'd kind of had it, and they fought back. And a riot broke out, which is known as the Stonewall Riots. And there were a series of them, clashes between the police and gay men, lesbians, and supporters of gay men and lesbians, and they are known as the Stonewall Riots. Take a look at this, a protest march. Stonewall means fight back, smash gay oppression. Here is another march. I love this picture. It's a gay guy with an older lady, and he's holding up a sign saying, "I love my straight mum," and she's saying, "I love my gay sons." 2 of them or more. Not just gay men, lesbians too. Look at this protest. Gay is good. I am a lesbian and should be treated as a human. Damn right. I am a lesbian and beautiful. Do you know how brave these people were? I really want to get that across. I think I've spoken before about how brave the suffragettes were, how brave the women's liberation movement people were. These guys and gals were amongst the bravest. Blows me away. One of the key figures we associate with the gay rights movement is Harvey Milk. He was the first openly gay elected official, government official, in San Francisco. This beautiful guy who was funny and generous and irreverent and terrific was assassinated. And there is a very interesting fashion tie-in. It was in the 70s that gay men started appropriating what we call tropes, T-R-O-P-E-S, tropes. That means a type, a recognizable sort of image, persona. For example, the cowboy, the biker, the lumberjack. These are, very sort of gay fashion images. All of these tropes were assimilated perfectly by the village people. You'll probably remember them. But to dress in these modes, be it, the leather biker look, or the cowboy look, or the lumberjack look, what were you saying to the world when you walked down the street? You were saying, "I'm gay." That's what you were saying, which was an incredibly brave thing to do in this era. So you have to understand that this mode of dress wasn't only a fashion statement, it was a political statement, a huge political statement. And to dress like this, you were really inviting violence often, and yet these guys dressed this way. It was a political statement. But where else have we seen civilian clothing used as a militant uniform? Because these tropes, during this era, they were uniforms. These guys were saying, "I'm gay." Got a problem with that? Well, we've seen this before. We've seen it a few times. The example that I think is the most parallel is in the 18th century. Do you remember the sans-culotte? By their mode of clothing, they were saying, "I'm not taking this anymore, and if you've got a problem with it, I'm going to fight you." The same goes with the 70s gay fashion tropes. Pretty interesting stuff, right? The next trend up, global warrior. This was huge. We're talking ethnic, we're talking Native American inspired, we're talking Indian inspired, all of this kind of stuff. Exotic prints, lots of color. It could draw from Africa, India, wherever. It was everywhere. You see it time and time again. Colorful, tribal, and fun. And the designer we tie into this the most is Kenzo. He really understood how to take all of these global elements and work them in fun, vibrant ways that would change every season. Sometimes he'd do African, sometimes he'd do Indian, sometimes he'd do Asian, but they always look terrific. Look at this jacket. And look at this sweater. Now, Kenzo was Japanese, but he was part of the French fashion syndicate, so we count him as a French designer. And look at this. This is a wonderful sort of mix of everything. By the time it hit the mainstream, not so good. Take a look at these images. You're not going to like them. Absolutely 70s and riding on that trend. The 70s was a decade of silly fads. Well, of course it was. The world was so scary and awful. People used silly fads to take their mind off things and to have a bit of a giggle. Things like troll dolls, pet rocks, mood rings, rings that you put on and they were supposed to change color with your mood, but of course they never did. And streaking, people running out into public areas naked, just for fun. And of course, there were fads in fashion. Things like this. Oh, there were so many fashion fads, jumpsuits, and things like this. These two-toned outfits. But really, we have seen this before, haven't we? When have we seen this before? Cast your mind back towards the beginning of the semester. Not the very beginning, but maybe, was it, I can't remember, week 5? Medieval Me Party. Yeah, Me Party came back in the 70s. And hot pants, they were a huge fad. Tiny little skimpy shorts, beloved of women who felt very sad that the miniskirt had ended. Miniskirts made them feel sexy, and so they loved the hot pants for a hot second. The next trend we're going to talk about is a mainstream trend, and I've dubbed it All American, and that's Donny Osmond of the Osmond Brothers, a singing group who were completely All American. They were from Utah and they were Mormons. You can't get more All American than that. All American really tied in with the Bicentennial in 1976. Remember, America celebrated 200 years of being in 1976, and bicentennial fever was everywhere, which was good. America needed a reason to feel proud of itself in the wake of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. Along with all this were movies like American Graffiti, Grease, of course. I'm sure many of you have seen Grease, which is set in an American high school in the 1950s, because this is all part of a 50s revival, too, that happened around this era, 76, 77. On television, the TV show Happy Days, this was all good, clean American stuff, which was quite nostalgic for the 1950s. And take a look at her, one of my favorite fashion images. I'm sorry it's blurry, but this is a gal who is working the spirit of 76. So we see an awful lot of red, white, and blue. And patchwork, either real patchwork or patchwork print. Why? Patchwork is a folk art. It's a very American folk art. So this tied in with this all-American Americana phase. It's still touching on nostalgia, isn't it? Take a look at this. Wow. Oh boy. Wow. Words fail me, but you have that kind of all-American look. A little bit 1950s, because this is the era of the 50s revival in sort of 76 onwards. Look at that patchwork, and then look closer. What do you see there? Oh yeah, we're going back to the 1890s with the bicycle and the leg of mutton sleeve. Red, white, and blue. I love this image. Red, white, and blue doesn't always look so cool, though. Take a look at this. I'm amazing. With stars and stripes and red, white, and blue. Oh my god, so 70s. And this is when we see denim arising as an absolute fetish textile. Oh yes, you could not get too much denim. Lashings of denim. But let's meet our style icon who really encompasses this all-American fad. Of course, Farrah Fawcett, known at the time as Farrah Fawcett Majors, because she was married to Lee Majors, the actor who played the Bionic Man. She had the look. Here she is in a commercial for some kind of hair blow dryer coma thing, styling her incredible hair for which she was famed. This poster of Farrah in the red one-piece was the most sold poster of the 1970s. Every guy had this poster. But she really had this all-American, comfortable, casual, super sporty look. She was the all-American beauty and everybody wanted to look like her. And her look really became a beauty ideal of the mid to late 1970s. Let's look at Sarah, and let's turn Sarah into an all-American beauty of the 1970s. Well, the first thing, we have to make her very tanned, Californian, healthy, all-American. And she should have blue eyes, lined with just a little bit of eyeliner. And then a highlight on her brow. Eyelashes only on the top, either lots of mascara or false eyelashes. A very healthy all-American glow. And then more highlight on the cheekbones. This was all about structuring your face with blusher and highlight. And then glossy red lips. And then when we put the perfect Farrah hair on her, we see we have transformed our Sarah into the all-American mid-70s beauty. But everybody wanted to look like this. Look at these two. They're going for the look. She's going for the look. She's going for the look, and her prom date is kind of going for Farrah hair himself. The next 70s trend I need to talk to you about is punk rock. It's so amazing to me that while people were wanting to look like Farrah Fawcett, other people wanted to look like this. Just look at this image for a minute. Remember I was saying that the overarching trend in silhouette in the 70s was wideness, wide collars, wide pants. Punk rock was skinny. So this was a shocker unto itself. Skinny pants, skinny t-shirts, so different. And punk rock did not come from the streets. It came from a designer who gave it to the streets because she was right there on the streets herself. This young fashion graduate, Vivienne Westwood. I cannot stress to you how revolutionary Vivienne Westwood was, but I also can't stress to you how small time she was when she first went into business with her boyfriend Malcolm McLaren, who was himself a small-time music producer manager type. The two of them got together and opened a shop called Sex. Yes, Sex, on the King's Road in fashionable Chelsea in London, the King's Road was very staid and rather posh, so imagine how offensive and shocking it was for a store like this to open. This was a reaction. Fashion is not an island, it's a response. This was a response to all the shit that was going on in the world. But instead of, oh, let's go back to Hollywood glamour, let's escape into vapid disco music, let's pretend we're African, Westwood and McLaren were saying, no, we are part of this, let's confront it. Sex was deemed very offensive, and the clothing that was sold in it was truly revolutionary. Things like this. T-shirts with the sleeves cut off, studded, covered in safety pins and chains. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before. When I think about fashion today, how everything is, oh, the 70s are back, the 80s are back, somebody's channeling Saint Laurent, somebody's channeling Bieber, someone's, oh, screw that. Westwood was revolutionary. This was new. The store's sex was eventually deemed far too offensive, and it was changed to boy. And boy is legendary. Westwood's first collection, I didn't even want to use the word collection, it sounds too grandiose. It wasn't a collection. This was Viv and her pals and her boyfriend Malcolm McLaren in the back room, adding studs and chains and safety pins to clothes and silk screening all themselves. It was called Seditionaries. Know this. This will really set you apart from those people who, oh, I want to be in fashion, I love fashion. But they don't know fashion. You will impress future employers if you can quote seditionaries. What is a seditionary? Well, a seditionary is somebody who goes against the government, who says bad things about the government. And so it's a rebel. It's a mouthy rebel, which is perfect. Punk rock. Seditionaries. What did Boy sell? Well, it sold black, studded, ripped t-shirts and pants, and a lot of fetish wear. Do you know what fetish wear is? Basically, fetish wear is still a small market in fashion, a specialty market. PVC, bondage gear, this kind of thing, sex stuff. But it was sold as fashion, as streetwear. It was so shocking. Look at this. Fuck forever. Excuse my language. Imagine you are in the mid-1970s and you are walking around with a t-shirt that says this, that shows a naked woman masturbating. This was shocking. Genuinely shocking. This is a classic seditionary garment. Tartan, red tartan, was huge in the early punk movement in seditionaries. Vivienne Westwood's ideas. Why? Well, tartan is a traditional British establishment textile, isn't it? Think of Prince Charles wearing a kilt. Seditionaries was all about going against the establishment. Punk rock was anarchy. The Sex Pistols, one of Malcolm McLaren's bands, his first band really, they were all about anarchy. They had a big hit single called Anarchy in the UK, and take a look at this. It's a tartan jacket establishment, and on the back, destroy with the crucifix upside down. Oh my God, so shocking. Also these pants, look at the straps, that's weird, that had never been seen before, and like a bum flap made of rubber with destroy written on it. Also, a lot of straitjacket kind of stuff. Oh my goodness, I cannot stress to you how exciting this was. I was, 11 or 12 when punk broke, and I was shocked. It was all over the newspapers. What the hell are these kids in London doing? Safety pins. They were a big feature of punk fashion. People would put them through their nose or they'd put them through their lips. It was about offending and shocking people. And of course, you had to top off your punk outfit with a badge, usually of a punk band like the Sex Pistols. And look at this. This is very offensive to the British establishment. The Queen, God Save the Queen, Sex Pistols, but look, it's like a ransom letter typography, ransom letter font, with her eyes covered. Oh my God, this was so offensive. It's ironic that Vivienne Westwood would then go on many years later to receive the OBE from the Queen that she had offended so much. The OBE is an award. It's like the Chevalier d'Honneur in France. It's the highest honor you can give a woman in England. It's the equivalent to a knighthood. I find that very funny. But it should always be remembered that punk fashion was part of British punk rock, the two completely intertwined, and that it was a collaborative effort between Vivienne Westwood and her boyfriend Malcolm McLaren. And there he is, and there she is, both wearing highly. Punk style, there was nothing like it. And it really happened. Take a look at these images of real punk rockers on the streets of London in the 70s. The mohawk hairdos, the electrically dyed hair. People were shocked, people were offended, people were appalled. But my God, it was exciting. And look at this image here. Everything Westwood, everything punk is here. The jacket and the pants with straps, the Doc Marten boots, the silk-screened offensive t-shirt, and the mohawk hair. Again, irony. This image is cribbed from the Vivienne Westwood retrospective at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Excuse me, you can't get more establishment than that. Punk rock and Vivienne Westwood have become part of British history, British cultural history, the British establishment. I think it's kind of wonderful. Very quickly though, other high fashion designers grabbed on to the idea of punk. This is Zandra Rhodes in her runway ready-to-wear collection, absolutely stealing all of Vivienne Westwood's ideas, but spinning them in a high fashion way. I think you knew this was coming. How could I resist? Let's take Sarah, and let's give her a suitably punk rock name. How about Sarah Vomit? That sounds like a perfectly British 70s punk name to me. Sarah Vomit. How do you get that look? Well, the first thing you should know is that punk rock makeup, be it on a woman or a man, was not bought at the drugstore. Punk rockers used theatrical makeup, they used stage makeup, but then stores like Boy started selling theatrical makeup, stage makeup, and you start with very long, spiky eyebrows that you would draw on with stage makeup with a pencil, and then a lot of dark red, strange lines everywhere, and a lot of eye makeup, a lot of eyeliner. That's not enough. We need more. It's still not enough. She's still looking like Sarah and not like Sarah Vomit. Come on, let's put more eye makeup on. There we go. Now we are really getting the punk rock beauty ideal. Strange arbitrary lines drawn down the nose. Color, strange color. Bright shapes, all very spiky though. Drawn everywhere. Red lips. Let's give her a safety pin through her lip and through her nose. And a spiked dog collar. Bunch of earrings. And dyed punk hair. And suddenly, Sarah is Sarah Vomit. And looks an awfully lot like this woman. Jordan. This is Jordan, and she is our punk rock style icon. Who was Jordan? Jordan was just a teenage girl from Brighton on the coast of England who would travel up by train for 2 hours every day to London just to hang out at Boy, basically. She was Vivienne Westwood's muse. She was her muse. Imagine being a muse. What a wonderful job. She really had the look. There she is in that Venus t-shirt we saw earlier. And here she is again. Everyone knew who Jordan was. Even people who weren't punk rockers knew who Jordan was. And there she is again with all of those strange lines painted on her face. And look at that sweater she's wearing. Punk rock was all about holes. It was all about rips and this kind of very loose knitwear full of holes. Jordan, God love her, a professional punk rock muse. I wouldn't mind having that job. You know what? Fashion, it's still grazing itself on Westwood's cutting edge. And here are some recent runway looks, obviously drawing entirely from Vivienne Westwood 40 plus years ago. Wow. Punk rock in the United States, by the end of the 70s, morphed into something called New Wave. It was kind of punk rock, but a little bit more poppy. New Wave was a musical movement, primarily. It started in the United States, but then it would move to England and the rest of the world. It jumped on punk rock, but it was much more poppy, much more synthesized, much more fun, actually. It borrowed from the 50s, it borrowed from the 60s, but it was also very futuristic. In terms of new wave fashion, you get a lot of plastic, a lot of PVC, a lot of color, a lot of neon. Some new wave bands you may have heard of are Blondie, for example, The Cars. And then, as we move into the early 80s, because, as I say, new wave straddled both eras, we get bands like The Flock of Seagulls, who are very neon, very fashion. But I wanted to start it here in the 70s. A lot of leopard print. New wave was exciting and it was new and it was all its own thing, and it should never be confused with punk rock or with the new romantics that we'll meet in a second from the 80s. New wave was its own thing. The best way to explain new wave style is to meet our style icon of the new wave era. Well, of course, Debbie Harry, the lead singer of the immensely popular new wave band Blondie. And there she is. She was a beautiful woman to begin with, but she absolutely created the new wave look for women. And there she is in all of her neon glory. She had almost neon blonde hair that sometimes she would two-tone. There she is, bright colors, bright colored tights with these tiny micro weird little mini dresses. They weren't quite 60s, but they were always very shiny or neon. She wore PVC, she wore plastic. She was weird and wonderful and exotic and beautiful. The first person ever to have two-toned hair. But she was a fashion icon. Look at this on the cover of Cosmopolitan, December 1978. I love this because this Cosmopolitan cover is, there's no getting around it. This is 1978. Look at the way Debbie Harry looked. Look at the way she dressed. Look at the way she did her makeup. And then look at this image. I showed you this earlier. This is also from 1978. It really shows you just how out there and revolutionary Debbie Harry was, and so many girls wanted to look like her. Not these girls, not these three girls, they didn't want to look like Debbie Harry, but oh my god, this girl wanted to look like Debbie Harry. And fashion goes back to her time and time again. This is Sophie Dahl on a recent cover of British Vogue channeling Debbie Harry. This is another fashion layout. Obviously, this is totally the Debbie Harry look. Look at this, Debbie Harry. I think she's kind of worth channeling. You know me, I get fed up with contemporary fashion just always troweling around the past for inspiration. But with Debbie Harry, I quite approve. Look at the makeup there. NARS recently brought out an entire range of makeup based on Debbie Harry's look. And this was, 40 years ago. A great quote from Debbie Harry that kind of sums up the 70s and brings us full circle. How can one be a feminist? How can one be a woman and not be a feminist? That's my question. See, it's still the 70s. It's all still part of the women's liberation movement. But we can't leave the 70s without looking at the new wave beauty ideal. Sarah, are you ready? It starts, of course, with a nice arched eye, quite natural, not like the punk eye. And then a lot of color on the eye. Shimmering, metallic, but color, neon preferably. Everything extended out to make a spiky point. Then very bright blush. And a bright neon lip. Let's give her some leopard skin. And let's give her neon hot pink hair. And that is the new wave beauty look. See what I mean? And here is a recent fashion magazine image that is obviously channeling the new wave look. Lots of neon. As you've now seen, the 70s was absolutely a trend-driven decade. And designers, retailers, and fashion editors not only needed to be kept constantly abreast of all the latest looks, but because fashion was moving so quickly, they suddenly wanted to know what was going to happen next. It wasn't enough to know what was happening now, they had to know what was happening next. And a young American fashion illustrator living in London predicted that people would want to know what was going to happen before it actually happened. And he knew that fashion was not an island, it was a response. And he invented a whole new chapter of the fashion industry. A chapter I know that some of you are interested in pursuing in your future careers. Fashion forecasting. Fashion forecasting is a product of the 70s. The first fashion forecasting company ever in the whole world was created at the very end of the 1960s, when this young man realized and predicted that the 70s was going to be all about trends and that people would want to know what the next big trend was going to be. Take a look at this. This is the cover. This is a collector's item, let me tell you, of I Am International's Spring Summer 75 Color Combo Ideas book. I Am stood for Imaginative Minds. This is an insert from an I Am report. And because this young man was an illustrator, he was able to draw clothes that didn't yet exist. The I Am report would come with swatches. It would come with ideas about how to make future trends relevant to individual customers. It was really incredible. How did he do it? Well, he realized that fashion was not an island, it was a response. He was right there, at the heart of everything. He would go to galleries, he would see what movies were opening, he would see what the kids in the clubs were wearing. Then he would piece everything together and voila, he could predict the next trend before it happened. And here he is in the 70s, a rather handsome, sort of Ben Affleck type. The man who invented fashion forecasting is called David Wolfe, and as I narrate this, in November 2015, he is still alive and well and an enormous authority in the fashion industry. He is also an LIM College Advisory Board member, and if you wonder how I, Prof H, am able to teach a course on 50,000 years of fashion, why I know so much about fashion, it's because not only is David Wolfe all of these incredible things, he's also my dad. Yes. And here is a picture of me and Dad, David Wolfe, doing some trend spotting, I guess, in the very early 70s. And we probably were trend spotting. He was always trend spotting, and he taught me how to trend spot. And look at what a fashion pose I'm striking there.